The phone call that would save Frank Sinatra's career came on a cold February morning in 1953. Frank sat in his nearly empty Beverly Hills home, surrounded by unpaid bills and canceled contracts, when his agent called with news about a small role in a war film called From Here to Eternity. "Frank, it's not much money. The role pays $8,000. $8,000. 2 years earlier, Frank had been earning $150,000 per film. Now, at the lowest point of his career, he was being offered a fraction of his former salary to play a supporting character who gets beaten to death halfway through the movie. "I'll take it," Frank said without hesitation. What happened next would transform Frank Sinatra from Hollywood's biggest has-been into an Oscar winner, proving that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're really made of. If you love discovering the untold stories behind music history's most incredible moments, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. 1951, 1952. The Fall. Frank Sinatra's career collapse had been swift and merciless. The man who'd been America's biggest singing sensation just 5 years earlier was now box office poison, his personal scandals having destroyed his professional reputation. The divorce from his wife Nancy in 1951 had alienated his core fan base, married women who'd seen Frank as the ideal family man. His tumultuous relationship with actress Ava Gardner had turned him into tabloid fodder, with their passionate fights and dramatic reconciliations playing out in public. Worse, Frank's voice was failing. The stress of his personal life had damaged his vocal cords, leaving him unable to hit the high notes that had made him famous. His recording contract with Columbia Records was terminated in 1952. His talent agency, MCA, dropped him as a client. By early 1953, Frank was essentially unemployable in Hollywood. Studio executives saw him as a risky investment, a fading star whose personal problems overshadowed his talent. "Nobody wants to work with Frank anymore," his former agent told reporters. "He's become more trouble than he's worth." Frank's financial situation was desperate. He owed massive amounts in alimony to Nancy. His Beverly Hills home was mortgaged to the hilt, and he had no steady income. The man who'd once commanded six-figure salaries was considering declaring bankruptcy. But Frank had one thing left: his belief in his own acting ability. While his singing voice had betrayed him, Frank knew he could act. He'd proven it in small roles in films like Anchors Aweigh and On the Town. All he needed was a chance. January 1953. The Book. Frank was browsing in a Beverly Hills bookstore when he discovered James Jones's novel, From Here to Eternity. As he read about the character of Private Angelo Maggio, a scrappy Italian-American soldier who dies defending his principles, Frank saw himself. Maggio was everything Frank understood. A tough guy from the streets who never backed down, even when backing down would save his life. The character was small in stature, but huge in courage. Exactly the kind of role Frank felt he was born to play. Frank learned that Columbia Pictures had bought the film rights, and that director Fred Zinnemann was preparing to cast the movie. The starring role of Robert E. Lee Prewitt was going to Montgomery Clift. Burt Lancaster would play Sergeant Warden. But the role of Maggio was still available. Frank began what would become the most desperate campaign of his career. February 1953. The campaign. Frank started by calling everyone he knew in Hollywood, begging for introductions to the film's producers. He contacted Harry Cohn, the notoriously difficult head of Columbia Pictures, multiple times. He reached out to director Fred Zinnemann through mutual acquaintances. The response was consistently negative. Studio executives saw Frank as too much of a risk for a prestige picture like From Here to Eternity. They wanted established dramatic actors, not faded crooners with personal problems. Frank Sinatra for Maggio? You've got to be kidding, one Columbia executive reportedly said. The guy can barely get a nightclub booking these days. But Frank refused to give up. He began showing up uninvited at Columbia Pictures, sitting in the waiting room for hours, hoping to catch Harry Cohn between meetings. "Mr. Cohn doesn't want to see you, Mr. Sinatra," secretaries told him repeatedly. Frank would smile and say, "I'll wait." This went on for weeks. Frank would arrive at Columbia every morning, sit in the lobby, and wait for someone, anyone, to give him 5 minutes to explain why he was perfect for the role of Maggio. March 1953. The audition that almost wasn't. Frank's persistence finally paid off when he learned that the cast and crew would be traveling to Hawaii for location shooting. Frank made a decision that would either save his career or bankrupt him completely. He bought a plane ticket to Honolulu with money he didn't have. Frank arrived at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, where the cast was staying, and positioned himself in the lobby. When Harry Cohn walked through, Frank approached him with the confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Harry, I flew here to ask you for 5 minutes. Just let me read for Maggio. If I'm wrong for the part, I'll get on the next plane home." Cohn was impressed by Frank's determination, if not his judgment. "Frank, you're broke, aren't you? Completely. And you flew to Hawaii to audition for an $8,000 role?" "I did." Cohn studied Frank's face, seeing something he recognized, the desperate hunger that could make or break a performance. "All right, Frank, you've got your 5 minutes. March 15th, 1953. The audition. Frank's audition for Maggio took place in director Fred Zinnemann's hotel suite. Montgomery Clift was there, along with several Columbia executives. Everyone in the room knew Frank's career was on the line. Frank began reading Maggio's dialogue, and something magical happened. The desperate, scrappy energy that had driven Frank to Hawaii infused his performance. He wasn't acting like Maggio. He was Maggio, a man fighting for respect, dignity, and survival. When Frank finished, the room was silent. Then Montgomery Clift, who rarely praised other actors, spoke up. "He's perfect for it. Nobody else could play Maggio like that." Fred Zinnemann nodded. "Frank, you understand this character in a way that's impossible to teach." Harry Cohn made the decision. "The role is yours, Frank. $8,000, take it or leave it." Frank tried to maintain his composure, but tears were streaming down his face. "I'll take it." April-June 1953. The performance. Filming From Here to Eternity became Frank's redemption. Every scene was performed with the intensity of a man fighting for his professional life. Frank's natural identification with Maggio's struggle gave his performance an authenticity that couldn't be faked. The other actors quickly realized they were witnessing something special. Burt Lancaster later said, "Frank brought a vulnerability to Maggio that none of us expected. He wasn't just playing the role, he was living it." Frank's most powerful scene came when Maggio is beaten to death by the sadistic Sergeant Fatso Judson. Frank's performance was so raw, so emotionally devastating, that several crew members were moved to tears during filming. Director Zinnemann knew he was capturing something extraordinary. Frank wasn't acting in that scene. He was expressing all the pain, frustration, and humiliation he'd experienced in his own life. August 1953, the film's release. When From Here to Eternity was released in August 1953, Frank's performance was universally praised. Critics who had written him off as a has-been suddenly discovered a serious dramatic actor. Frank Sinatra's Maggio is a revelation, wrote the New York Times. He brings depth, humor, and tragic humanity to what could have been a one-dimensional character. The film was a massive commercial success, becoming one of the highest-grossing movies of 1953. Frank's comeback was complete. He was no longer a faded crooner, but a legitimate movie star. But the ultimate vindication came 5 months later, March 25, 1954. Oscar night. Frank sat in the Pantages Theater, nominated for Best Supporting Actor for his role as Maggio. He was competing against established dramatic actors, and few expected the former singing star to win. When presenter Mercedes Ruehl opened the envelope and announced Frank Sinatra for From Here to Eternity, Frank was stunned. He walked to the stage in a daze, holding the Oscar that represented complete professional redemption. In his acceptance speech, Frank's voice broke with emotion. "This is a moment I'll never forget. 2 years ago, I thought my career was over. This film, this role, this recognition, it means everything to me." Behind his brevity was a deeper truth. Frank had risked everything on his belief in himself, and that belief had been vindicated in the most public way possible. 1954-1998. The Renaissance. Frank's Oscar win launched what became known as his Renaissance period. Record companies competed to sign him. Film offers poured in. His singing voice, strengthened by newfound confidence, was better than ever. Frank signed with Capitol Records and began recording some of his greatest albums, including Songs for Young Lovers and In the Wee Small Hours. His acting career flourished with films like The Man with the Golden Arm and Guys and Dolls. But Frank never forgot the desperation that had driven him to Hawaii in 1953. He often spoke about the importance of taking risks when everything seems lost. "Sometimes you have to bet everything on yourself," Frank said in a 1965 interview. "When I flew to Hawaii for that audition, I had $8 in my pocket and no career to speak of. But I had something more important. I had hope." Frank's comeback became legendary in Hollywood as an example of persistence overcoming adversity. The story of his desperate campaign for the Maggio role inspired countless struggling actors to keep fighting when success seemed impossible. Years later, Harry Cohn admitted that hiring Frank for From Here to Eternity was one of the best decisions he'd ever made. Frank's desperation made him perfect for that role. A comfortable, successful actor couldn't have captured Maggio's hunger. Frank was hungry, literally and figuratively. The legacy. Frank Sinatra's transformation from has-been to Oscar winner in the span of 1 year remains one of the most dramatic comebacks in entertainment history. It proved that talent, determination, and the willingness to risk everything could overcome even the most devastating career setbacks. The role of Angelo Maggio not only saved Frank's career, it defined it. For the rest of his life, Frank would be known as much for his acting as his singing. The Oscar gave him credibility, respect, and the freedom to choose roles that interested him rather than ones that simply paid the bills. More importantly, Frank's comeback changed how Hollywood viewed fallen stars. His success proved that personal scandals didn't have to mean career death, that audiences would forgive almost anything if the talent was genuine and the performance was authentic. Frank's desperation audition in Hawaii became the template for the modern celebrity comeback. The story has been retold countless times as an example of how belief in yourself can overcome any obstacle. When Frank Sinatra died in 1998, his Oscar for From Here to Eternity was prominently displayed in his Beverly Hills home. It represented more than just recognition for a single performance. It was a symbol of resilience, redemption, and the power of refusing to give up on your dreams. Today, From Here to Eternity is considered one of the greatest war films ever made. And Frank's performance as Maggio is cited as one of the finest examples of casting an actor against type. The role that nobody wanted to give him became the role that defined his legacy. Frank Sinatra's journey from desperation to triumph reminds us that sometimes our lowest moments can become the foundation for our greatest achievements. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're truly capable of becoming. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to know that it's never too late for a comeback, and that sometimes risking everything on yourself is the only way to find out how much you're really worth. Have you ever had to bet everything on yourself when success seemed impossible? Let us know in the comments about the moments when you found the courage to risk it all for your dreams.